Let's take a look at a real example to see how garbage collection actually works. So I've got my garbage collection project open up here, and in my snippets file, I've scrolled down to the garbage collection section. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the garbage collection routines that are available to us. So first, I'm going to copy these 3 lines. I'm going to paste them into my application. Now, there's a global object in .NET called GC. And you can see I'm using that right here on line 12. The GC object is the garbage collector. And I'm going to call a function on the GC object, which is a static function here, called getTotalMemory. And it takes a parameter. I'm not going to go too deeply into this. Don't worry about what this does. Basically, I'm saying to the garbage collector, hey, tell me how much total memory is currently allocated to my application. So this is a pretty simple place to start. Let's just build this and run it and see what happens. So I'm going to run it, and the console is going to write out how much allocated memory there is to my app. And you can see that when I run this, the amount of memory that's allocated to my application right now is 186,836 bytes. Now, don't worry if this number looks different for you in your example. This is going to be different for everyone's system. This is basically how much memory is currently allocated to my app. So let me hit return, and we'll exit the app. Okay, let's go back to the snippets and paste in some more information. So the next few lines, I'm going to copy right here. I'm going to paste those below these lines. So starting on line 16, I'm going to allocate 100,000 bytes in an array that holds bytes. So this is 100K of memory that I'm going to allocate. And then I'm going to basically do the same thing here on lines 18 through 20 that I do at the beginning of the program. And we'll see if this makes a difference in how much memory the garbage collector thinks is allocated to my program. So let's run this. And you'll see that we start off with 186,000 bytes. Now let me hit return, and this is going to cause the allocation to happen. And now you can see that the amount of memory allocated to my app is 295,060 bytes. Now notice it's not exactly 100,000 bytes more than the original size. Again, don't worry too much about that, and don't worry too much if this number looks different for you on your system. The .NET framework keeps track of a whole bunch of overhead internally. So when I allocated those 100,000 bytes, a lot of other things happened under the hood. So it looks like more memory got allocated than I asked for, but that's just the .NET framework doing its work. So let's go back to the application. Now what we're going to do is actually trigger the garbage collection process. So I'm going to copy these lines here. I'm going to paste them in here. And you'll notice that on line 22, I'm calling the garbage collector's collect method. This will actually trigger the garbage collection process. So we're going to start off by seeing how much memory my application gets when it starts. Then we're going to allocate a whole bunch of memory and see how much that changes things. Then we're going to call the garbage collector's collect function, which will cause the garbage collector to go out and look at memory and say, hey, how much memory isn't being used and how much can I reclaim? And that's going to be this line right out here. We're going to write out what the results of that are. So let's save this and run it. Okay, so we start off with 186K. It goes up to 295K. Now let's watch what happens when the garbage collector runs and we call the collect function. Okay, it looks like the allocated memory dropped back down to about 210,000, almost 211,000 bytes. Again, I didn't get all 100,000 bytes back, and that's because, as I said earlier, the .NET framework has some overhead that it's working on. So it did figure out, however, that those bytes actually aren't being used by anybody. So I was able to reclaim those bytes by running the garbage collection process. Now, again, I want to emphasize that this is just an academic exercise here, and it shows you how the garbage collector works. There are going to be very few instances in your C# career when you're going to have to actually care about running the garbage collector, if ever. I've been working with C# for a long time. I've never actually had to do this. But it's interesting to see how the garbage collector works and what you can do with the garbage collector to figure out how much memory your application is consuming.